if you want to hit record. There we go. Welcome to IEA Great Lakes. And if you can mute yourself, we would appreciate it. Over in the left-hand corner, if you can hit that mute button and turn on the video, we would love to see you. And we will get started. Erica, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you do a few announcements. And then we'll get started with our guest today.
Yes, well, welcome to the March Midday Cafe. It's always a joy when it's third Wednesday. So glad to see you guys. We've got an awesome session for you today with the authors of the new book, Spiritual Rhythms for the Enneagram. And so before we dive in with them, just want to let you know we have some things coming up in the IEA Great Lakes region. And so I'm going to be posting a link to Jerry Wagner's trainings that he has coming up. He has several things across the country and even one international that's coming up pretty soon. And then also certification and training that's coming up for our very own Clare Loughrige. And so you want to check that out. There'll be a link for that as well in June, the 4th through the 7th. So several of us on the call today have been through that Motions of the Soul training, and it is invaluable if you are just looking as an enthusiast or whether you are wanting to really dive into the Enneagram as a practitioner in a helping profession. So we would love for you to check out those options. And then want to tell you too, go ahead and mark third Wednesday of the month for April. We're excited to host Oliver Nicklin as our guest, and Oliver is part of the IEA GLR board. He is a beloved head type, and man, he's going to be bringing us some heady wisdom. He works with the University of Chicago, and so he's going to be sharing with us what he does out of University of Chicago with the Enneagram. He's also done some research with celiac disease and even some rats that he's working with, doing some testing. And then he's written something with the Book of Revelation with the Enneagram too. So just come fully present to know that some of it may be pretty deep in the head, but we'll drop it into the heart and the gut as well as we bring some harmony to that. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Teresa. We'll be dropping in some links and things, ways you can connect with the authors throughout. So make sure you click on the chat there and you can see the links to be able to follow. But Teresa McCloy, I'm going to let you take it away.
Awesome. I will say too, this always goes up on YouTube. So we'll have this in our IEA Great Lakes YouTube channel. We'll have it up sometime later today. That is a great place. If you want to share the book out with your friends, you can grab that YouTube link and be able to share it in your groups that you have on Facebook, or send out an email if you have an email list, or just to share it out to a few people if you're wanting to introduce them. Oh, how can we all not go, oh, over the baby, right? The baby just came. And so we'll have that link up. Just research Erica put the link in for the YouTube channel, and share this out because we love this book. We love the information that it's giving, not only information, but transformation that it's inviting people to. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce, I think everybody knows Scott and Claire, but Doug and Adele Calhoun as well that are joined us on the call. And we're excited to have both of them as the authors of this new book. And I'm just going to let them introduce themselves if they would, and just give us a little bit of really the question I have is, even how did the two of you meet? So after your introduction, where you cross paths and how you meet, if you want to give us the lowdown on that. And we'll kind of just dive into a little bit of the backstory of even how this book kind of got birthed and formed. So Doug and Adele, welcome to IEA Great Lakes. Share with us just where you're from and a little bit of backstory.
You met Claire first. So
how did we meet Claire? So Claire and I met Claire. I don't remember the year, Claire. 2000 and what? 1? 2? At a Transforming Center retreat where she was a participant and she was in my small group. And then our paths kept crossing through Transforming Center related things.
Okay.
And we took the Jerry Wagner's course together. And so we had a whole week. And so we got knee deep in the Enneagram starting out there together. And then we through the Transforming Center, we kept seeing and started doing some vacation times together, and they've been on a pilgrimage with us. And so we were simply friends and coworkers. It's also great because we were co-senior pastors right at that time, and they were as well. And there aren't many of us around the lake, so we hooked up and shared and commiserated what that's like, as well as the joys and the wonder of being able to serve together as a couple.
Awesome. Scott and Claire. Doug and Adele, where do you locate? Where do you currently live at?
So we're just outside of Boston in a little town called Needham, and we've been here a bunch of years, both now and earlier. So we serve part-time in a church, and then we do spiritual direction and Enneagram training the other half of our time.
Awesome. And the reason I asked that is this book was brought together from 2 different locations, so as we think about working across the miles, I know that you were in person a few times and different times, but a lot of the work was done back and forth, which I think is an interesting backstory to how this book kind of became birthed. So Scott and Claire, welcome to I think everybody knows where you're located and all of that, but give us a little bit of that just for our YouTube listeners as well.
Yeah.
Where are you located?
I'm located right here. I was thinking of that story, of how we met. So the 3 of them kind of schemed together because I actually wasn't in that training with Jerry. I did mine after that. And I think Claire said, "Oh, you've got to meet Doug and Adele." And I said, "Well, that'll be fine." So that's just how 9's approach.
That's what he said.
And it's been really fine. It's been fine in the best sense of the word. It's been a fine experience.
Yeah, and what Adele, when she says we were in a small group together, it was really small. She was my spiritual director. That's where I met up with Adele, and I was in quite a place in my life at that time, and she was a part of opening the door for me to see my soul in the presence of God's love. And so it became natural for the relationship to continue from there, especially because when you feel safe with someone, you can begin to open up places that you didn't even know were there. And then, we would have these conversations. I remember driving from the airport in Boston with Doug and Adele. And I got in the car and I just said, "So how is it with your soul?" And Doug said, can you hang on for just a minute here? Could we talk about maybe the weather or something? Just for a minute, Claire. Do we have to go? We're in traffic. Can we wait till we get through the traffic? So anyway, it's been a safe relationship to look at the inner terrain and certainly to look at Enneagram typology with people who hold you reverently and see God's image in you. Even when there's other stuff they can see too. They can see God's image in you in the midst of that.
Yeah, and I would say the interaction that we had together that Doug was describing about being able to have time together, I think that really helped us be able to land on the thought that the 4 of us could do this together. So just knowing the difficult process that could be, but it's been a wonderful process. Certainly it has been difficult, but difficult good. I think we've worked well together and really grateful for Doug and Adele, certainly.
Yeah, amen.
Awesome. Well, and I have to say, even personally, I'll take 2 seconds to say I'm grateful. The very first time I heard the Enneagram presented was by Doug and Adele. And so it's just so neat, I think, for many of us that have known all 4 of you for quite some time to see this work come together. And so grateful as well just for the work that you've done and just to even see it develop and then how the 2 stories have crossed. So beautiful for that. Well, let's dive in because both of you have mentioned Jerry Wagner and his work, and Jerry, of course, here in the Great Lakes community. I'd like to just talk about in the book, he wrote the foreword for the book. And I know I haven't talked with Doug and Adele about that, but I know Claire has talked about just what that meant for him to write that forward and to do that. So can you talk about just the background of that work that you've had with Jerry, and then how that has formed with you, and then having him be a part of writing that forward. Doug and Adele, your thoughts in that and the work that you did there?
Well, he certainly, we had a number of different teachers around the Enneagram prior to going to see Jerry, but his course really was quite formative because it's a formidable course, a lot of great information, but also just his modeling of how he taught and everything really, I think, prepared the way for many of the things that we did. And his generosity in sharing his material is legendary, and so we're grateful for that too. And I think the fun part was knowing him as a very early adapter who would look at what her and us developed and be able to say, this is good. This is a healthy, new old rendition brought to light without any sense of, but what the heck are you guys talking about and why are you bringing this to the table? It was just the opposite. There was a great deal of support and enthusiasm. And so that's a kind soul at work, really, and we're very grateful for him.
Scott and Claire, thank you, Doug, for that. Scott and Claire, I know as he says that, and I don't have my book, it's in my luggage that didn't arrive, but right at the end of his foreword, he says, this is the new, I'm not sure the exact phrase of how he says it, but Claire has her book there, but he does give the harmony triad model his blessing and the way he reads it. Claire or Scott, would you want to share with us what he says there at the end?
Scott's going to look it up, and I'm going to share my screen with you for just a minute. And just give, the, oops, I don't want to end the meeting for all.
Let's not.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. So I want to just show you the PowerPoint, and if I can. Some days it works, some days it doesn't. So I'm not going to show it to you. Well, let me just show you my hands since I can't bring it up. So of course, you have the hexagonal feature and arrows and wings with the process Enneagram. And our model is the triangles with 3, 6, 9, 1, 4, 7, 2, 5, 8, not defining any arrows as a way of integration or disintegration, stress or health. We're actually saying that you can pick up the grace from either space. That is not your dominant space. You have a dominant space. So I'm a 3, that's my heart, but I can pick up my IQ and my EQ. And so Jerry teaches the process Enneagram in his course, and his foreword, he's actually saying this is the next thing to look at, is the work that we've done with harmony triads. And so Scott, do you want to read that quote?
Sure. He says, and so you ask, do we really need another Enneagram book on our bookshelves? And I would answer, yes, this one. It adds material and insight that other books don't have. Is the Enneagram a fossilized framework etched in stone or to be passed on dogmatically as is? Or is it a living system that can grow and develop with additional accretions and insights? I think the latter is the case.
And then he goes on at the end and recommends the book. So that's what we want to say. We still recommend Jerry and recommend his trainings. Even the training and certification we provide is not in competition with that, because all of these models are incomplete. And what we offer with the harmony is actually to say there's a way that we believe transformation is possible. And we're happy to have our teachers thumbs up on that. So.
That was awesome. And just because of what Jerry's meant to this community, I just wanted to really tie together just that blessing that he has given this work and the friendship that all of you have as authors with him and the work that he's done. And very well said. And it's not a competition. It's all great and beautiful work that we're doing with the Enneagram. So let's dive in. One of the questions I had for both of you is, if I was to pick up this book off the bookshelf and I didn't really know a whole lot about the Enneagram. How do you see, what was your thoughts in writing this book, how you would see people using it? There's so much wonderful content. Erica and I were talking just about each chapter and how many sections there are in each chapter for people to work through. So describe for us how you see people, or how we can really use this book and how you see. Adele, what's your thoughts?
Well, when we were planning, the big picture was, let's give people who are therapists and coaches and spiritual directors and pastors and healthcare people a tool that is very accessible as they work with people over a period of time. And we weren't at all sure, that this was a level 1 book, that it would be helpful for people to have some knowledge of the Enneagram before they got into the book. But the crazy thing is, we've talked to a number of people who basically don't have any training in the Enneagram, and they love the book, and they feel like it's been a great way for them to take their time with the number and get into it. So I'm hopeful that it actually spans a much broader demography in terms of who it will appeal to than we maybe originally thought.
And I would say it was also formulated with the idea that at one point somebody said, well, I really read your book, I really love it. And I said, well, great, now go back and do the book, because it is easily read. We've got good writers on the team, but the invitation in the book is actually to do a lot of work. So there's a lot of questions for each section, on self-reflection, Bible reflections, story and history related. And so it is, in that sense, it's pretty accessible. It's also pretty challenging, but it's also a great environment in which to really get to know yourself and how God is at work transforming you.
I think I counted, there's either 8 or 9 sections in each chapter, with multiple questions in each of those. So as you said, yes, you could read the book, but I really find, not everyone on the call may have the book yet, but that it is a read a section, pause, work through those questions, sit with those. So whether you're a practitioner or an Enneagram professional that's using the book, great questions for you to ask someone as a coach or a spiritual director, or to have people work with, but then also, just multiple layers of peeling back the onion, as we say, as you work through each chapter, and then get to work in your harmony triad, right? And do that work and use some of the practices. Scott and Claire, what are your thoughts as you were going into this project and working together, of where you saw someone relating with the book and how you saw that?
I'll go first. Is it okay? Or do you want to?
After you.
All right, thanks. I was recently in a conversation with a woman that had said she had a little bit of exposure to the Enneagram, but she said the thing that was really difficult for her was she just felt stuck. She said that she told me she was a 2, and she said, I was really just discouraged with the material that she had encountered, and she was just picking up the book. And I think that one of our deep hopes was that people could realize that movement and transformation is at the core of what our hope is for everyone that picks the book up, that there is a way to access your head, your heart, and your gut, and not just be stuck in type, and not be discouraged by the realities of each type, but be able to access the goodness of our home space, and then also access these other parts of what are true about each one of us. So yeah, I think that just really transformation and movement, that people could begin to access and move. I think movement just comes to mind with this question for me. I think that that's really the heart, and certainly with what all of us, our background is, even with pastoring, that's really what you're hoping for in a person's life, that they're growing and becoming more healthy. So that was certainly something I think we wanted to make a part of the book.
Yeah, I think, really big thing for us, and certainly you'll see it woven throughout the book, are not only these penetrating questions, but ways for people to practice. So we really think it's all about practice. Any good thing that ever happens in our life is around practice. And so giving ways for people to practice. And it isn't to say that what you'll find in your own chapter around your own dominant style and connecting with your all three centers of intelligence, we don't think that it's the be all and the end all, but what we do believe is those practices will actually help open you up to practices that are really truest for you. So while one question is a gateway, to get you to ask yourself a question, so that you might actually find the question that's underneath that question. So I don't mean to sound all, mystical, but the truth is that we really believe that there is more mystery behind the human person than just giving a self-help book that says, try these tips, which I did have in the first guide that I wrote. I did add the tips for types. I think that's great. I think tips are great. But what I really have come to appreciate is that you know more about yourself, and given the space and time to let a question open something up for you, you're going to discover treasure. So the book is really a way for you to keep opening up, not a way to put something heavy or ill-fitting on you, but a way for you to say, wow, I had not thought about that, and what that does is lead me to this. So that's that is our big, hairy, audacious dream there, is that whether you're far along in the journey and you've been in the process Enneagram, which all the people on this call that are here, we know have been doing work with the Enneagram. But when it goes on YouTube, what we want to say is we'd like to help clear the deck for you and offer you a really simple model for you to see yourself with your IQ, your intellect, your EQ, your emotional intelligence, and your GQ, which is your gut intelligence. And you have access to all three of them, and some are undernourished, some are dismissed, but there's a way for us to open up to all of that grandeur on the inside.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions for Doug and Adele and Scott and Claire, but then we're going to open it up to some questions. So if you have a question, you want to post that in the chat. We'll come back around to those, but as you're listening, if you'd like for them to go a little bit deeper with something we're talking about, make sure you post that in the chat and we'll come back around. But a couple of other things that I'd like for you, and not that they're, again, to lead us to tips or here's the answer and here's the way, but there's two words and two things that you talk about in the book. That one is the word flow. So I'd love for you to just expand that out for us and what you use. And then the second one, and we can do these in two orders, is the acronym that you have, STOP. And I'd like to hear you talk about both of those things. So Doug and Adele, would you want to guide us in flow or stop? And then we'll do both of those. I'd love to just hear those from the authors themselves.
Well, I think we'll do stop because I know Claire loves flow.
I thought that might be where you would go, but I want to set it up that way.
As long as you're okay with that, dear heart, we'll get it.
We are so good. We are so good.
You are good.
Well, we actually, as we had used something very similar in our teachings when we were describing the process of how we are in our true self and we push our gift, and then we end up falling away to the false self, and then we come awake like the prodigal son comes awake out in the far lands. And the question is, so how do you get home? And basically we discovered that the first thing we have to do is it's basically surrendering, but it's some sort of stopping what's going on. You have that little moment of time when you realize I'm about to go into that triggered response that I always have. I'm just about to say something. And you actually do have a choice to be able to stop that impulse. So it's checking the false self impulse. And in that stop, being able to, so the S is to see, oh, look, here's what's going on. And hopefully with the Spirit's help, then you are aware that you're triggered. So you realize, I don't want to go there anymore.
And you name what just triggered me.
Yeah. And then your O is the opening. And in that case, what we're saying is typically in our false self, we get constricted around something. So if I'm in my gut, that's what's really tight. And instead I open and I say, so what does my head say? What does my heart say? What does my body tell me? And in that I'm opening finally to P, which is presence. And in our case, we really think it's to God's presence in this moment. It's certainly to my own presence. And then if I'm doing that, I'm actually finally open to you. And then the choice of what I can do is usually pretty clear, and it's not my false self. The true self has a chance to shine. What else would you say?
I think that little sliver of time that we have before we open our mouth and is really the moment that God gets our attention and says, you can lean into your true self, or you can go with default automatic. So to me, it's a beautiful place of, I'll take a breath, I'll breathe in, and I'll say, what does my head think? Think for a minute. What does my heart feel? So checking in with, and the gut instinct, these things provide a much bigger framework for any experience. And we can't always do that in the moment, but we can always go back to that moment and say, what was going on? And it is in practicing stopping that I actually become transformed into the person that God had in mind and dreamed up from the beginning. So it's just a little acronym, but we feel like if you practice it, your relationships can start to change today. Today, this moment, this interaction is the place of transformation. And I've heard people say, well, I can't change. That's just the way I am. And I've seen too many people change to believe that. You may not want to do the hard work, but you can change. And you can change your relationships. And that's the beauty of some of these acronyms that are just practicing with the Spirit.
Thank you for that. And this is one of how the book is laid out is, by the harmony triads. And then at the back of the book are these 9 resources, again, the practices that you can put into practice. And I think if I'm correct, and again, my book is not right in front of me, but I think if I'm correct, this is the very first resource, is the stop resource. Is that correct?
And we do it for every number.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So we do it for every number.
Mm-hmm. And so beautiful resources in the back of the book as well. So this is, and we've referred to other books that way as that, chair-side resource, so to speak, something you can just pull up and open up. I've been using it in the mornings myself just to go to some of those resources and those practices and read through those. And so I think that's going to be the beauty of the book is it's dog-eared and underlined and notes written and becomes just a living, breathing part of our journey with the Enneagram. So Scott and Claire, deferred to you in sharing with us flow. And you use that word so often in how you speak of this harmony triad movement. So give us a little more insight into flow.
Yeah, so flow, the acronym flow starts with being free and able to let go of our false self reactions. That's where we start. Don't you love the word flow? I mean, I just love the word flow.
Because we're charismatics,
right.
Can't help ourselves. Go ahead, keep going.
And then the letter L simply stands for loving. So we start by letting go of false self reactions, and then loving is second. The O stands for being open to our head, our heart, and our gut or our body center. And then the W is being with God and the reality of this moment as it is. So that's what flow stands for.
Yeah, and so what we practice, even in our training and certification course, is flow all week long. So we practice this free, opening up space, beginning to breathe, accessing the reality of love within our own soul and the love of God, which is available to us. And this opening, even looking and seeing if we can open up more space, opening head, heart, and gut. We actually do practices, and the book is defined many of the practices, whether it's heart math, where we pay attention to opening up space around the heart, body prayers that give us a way to open up the body as a vehicle to experience God. And imaginative prayers, which is the IQ, being able to access. So flow is really, unlike stop, that feels like this step by step. Flow is really about opening up each gate and opening them and being with God, with everything that as it is, and seeing if we can create space around it to discover what else God is doing. So it's defined, even though we define all of our terms in the beginning, the way the book is laid out, there's an introduction, then there's key terms. So each of the terms is defined for you so that as you're reading the book, you're not like, wait a minute, what did that mean? You can actually go back and discover that. Each of the chapters are laid out in a way that does this kind of opening up practice, stopping practices, journaling practices, sacred reading practices. We have story in each of the chapters from individuals who are opening to all three centers of intelligence. And so that flow is happening all throughout, that we're actually opening to flow, that we're not all stuck in our type, but we're opening up to all that is available to us, flow. So
I'd like to add.
Go ahead, Adele.
Bit of being with what is. So much of the trouble and dissonance that we have going on in relationships and even in this country is that we cannot be with what is. We try to take it and shift it and change it and make it what we want it to be. And so we start forcing reality to be something it isn't, rather than saying, where is God in what is right now? How do I be with God and with what is, so that I'm not manipulative or controlling, but present?
Good. So thank you for sharing those two words with us. I have one final question, and then we'll open it up to some Q&A. And we don't have to take a long time on this, but each of the types start with a mantra. And we hear a lot about positive affirmation and all of these things right now. So what does that mantra mean for you as the authors? Because every chapter at the very beginning in that type talks about the mantra. So share with us just a little bit about what that mantra practice is. I know that's been huge for me in my work with the Enneagram and connecting the harmony triads, is the mantra piece and how that's approached for me and how I use that almost as a breath prayer in things. And so can you talk just a little bit about the mantra, and then we'll open up for some Q&A.
Claire, go for it.
Defer.
Yeah, so the mantra really is choosing a word from each of your centers. And while we have that title there, we hope it's a gateway for you to find your own. And so it chooses a word from each of the Enneagram styles and then puts them together in a way that you're opening up all three centers. And so effective loyalty harmonizes for me is a big honking deal. Mm-hmm. So I can be effective and I can leave a lot of people in my wake. But if I'm actually paying attention to my head, which is loyalty, and my gut, which is harmonizing, right? Peaceful, I can be more than my type in the moment. And so that kind of breathing. So the mantra is really to say, you are more than your Enneagram style. You are more than just a heart person or a gut person or a head person. And it's a way to remind you. And then again, to take that mantra and make one of your own. And that is one of the things that we hope happens for people, is that they'll discover those 3 words that helps them live into the truth about them. Yeah.
And
So you have a mantra? Go ahead, Adele.
Well, it is a prayer. It's in the moments when I'm feeling stuck. My mantra is creativity joyfully renews, because I can just get completely caught up in the creative process and nobody else exists to me. And I'm very serious about what I'm doing. No levity, please. I'm serious. I'm creating. So to see that this creativity is not just, I'm a 4, I'm in the 4 space, this is typical. No, that this creativity actually is for something. It's for joy, and it's for renewing, and it pulls me out of the depths into a broader world and connection, and out of my type. I'm more than my type.
Doug and Scott, mantras that you might have?
Yeah, well, mine is, and it's the one that's in the book. Coming from a 9 space, it's peace affects team. But I would say this as well is, not only does it give intention for myself or for, it's easy for me to access the peace part, but I can access that, my heart space, the effective place. Having the mantra helps me kind of bring all team members to the game, I suppose, would be language that I like, just because I've got a sports background, but it helps me stay mindful even when I try to access those other spaces, to try to bring everything to the table. So it's helpful that way as well, I would say. Yeah.
Doug, how about you?
I often use the one that's in the book, Goodness Creates Joy. It's a very similar one to Adele's, because we're in the same triad. And similarly, it's the challenge with goodness as a 1 is you can get so caught up in it that it gets way, way serious and sort of polarizing. And so to have the sense that the goodness is actually has a gluey effect of creating and drawing others in, and it's meant to produce a fulfillment, like joy. When joy often comes when we're filled up. And so I often think of it, if my goodness is the way it's really meant to be, other people are going to be delighted with it, as opposed to feeling condemned by it. And so that really pulls me out of my false self 1 world in a healthy way.
Thank you for all of those, and for being personal with us and sharing, even though they're in the book. I think it's neat to hear that, yes, that is the mantra of the 9, and the 1, the 4, the 3 coming from the author. Lori, I'm going to start with your question that you just asked, and she sent it actually by email. It just popped up because it is, I think, around this mantra idea. And you said, does it always have to start with your dominant number? And so I know for me, it does not. As a 3, like Claire, I do mine backwards. Mine is peaceful devotion brings effectiveness, because even though 3 is my dominant, I know that for me, it's always about leaning into my 9 and coming from that place of peace. So your thoughts, Lori, as you back to the authors, even on that?
Yeah, I'm like you, Teresa, as who knows what I'm identifying with this week, but it's my it started in another number that wasn't dominant. It was the same thing. 3, 6, 9 triad of starting in a harmonized place giving clarity and then courage to make decisions. So I just heard all of you guys talk about your mantra starting in what I would think was, I understood to be your more dominant number. So that was just my question.
Mm-hmm.
Let me speak to that for a second, Lori. I think that there's so much openness and possibility with it that it may even change over time. You might want to start with what you dismissed as a child in order to welcome that part of yourself. You may want to start with your dominant number because it has been most rejected by others, and so affirming that this is my God-givenness and it's good, or it might be the one that is undernourished that you just want to bring lots more nourishment to, and so it really is very individual. And I think all of us would say try them on and see what opens up grace for you, what opens up space, and go from there. And so you're still wondering about your type?
No, I think I'm pretty, I'm still, I've found it, but I think I should always be open, I guess, to learning. I don't know. What do you guys think I am? I don't know. We'll go from there. No. I think, it's interesting. So is the dominant type then always the dismissed child? Because I found the place that I start in the mantra is from the dismissed child place. So that's kind of how it came through there. But still working with it, I really appreciated going to the training that you had, Claire and Scott, on that. I've really been continued to be drawn back and engaging in that. So I really loved that training and helps in understanding the book.
Oh yeah, that book is going to be honey for your soul.
I know.
So we have several questions. Lori, thank you for yours as well. And so I'd like to come back to those. They're actually in the chat if you want to read through them in the chat. But let's start up at the top. Kathleen actually said she's been enjoying the book with small groups. Is there future plans for a guide to use with small groups? Has that been thought about? I know we just released this one last week, so not sure where you're at on a guide, but anyone care to answer that question for Kathleen?
Adele.
You don't ask somebody who just had a baby if they're going to have another baby.
Great answer.
There's just still way too much birth and then after birth with all the marketing. For me to think about another child is almost like, no.
Right? There might even be a little postpartum depression going on. I don't know.
No, I have great joy in the book. I feel like there are lots of questions that it's accessible for small groups. They can use this. Every chapter ends with a small group study on empathy for every number. And at this moment, as I think of writing a small group guide, I would have to think more about it because I feel like everything that's needed for a small group to discuss is right there.
Right there, yeah.
Yeah, it would almost seem as if it would be something that would need to just be some restructuring possibly to put in a guide where it's maybe more accessible. But I agree. I think we did talk about it some with IVP and came up that there was plenty in here. So I guess time will tell.
Well, the word handbook is correct. So it is, this is something that you're actually going to be able to keep bringing back and utilizing as a way to journey with community and alone.
So to get to all the questions, let's see if we can get through them all. Is there a connection to stop and flow that makes going into flow a good practice right after having gone through the stop process? And that's from Jill. So I don't know if you all can read it there. So anyone want to dive into the connection between stop and flow?
Go ahead.
So these are 2 practices, and I'm going to say the answer could be yes or no.
I'm so surprised. I'm so surprised at that answer.
I'm so surprised. It's yes and no. But there's this sense in which some people are just better focusing on one thing. I'm going to practice stopping. And then there will be other numbers who like, oh, I want to go into flow. And so I don't think there's a yes or no.
And I would say, as her loving partner, I think what stop does is really you're trying to get out of your false self and encounter the true. And if you're opening to presence, like the stop invites you to, then flow is actually the natural next step, because you're getting back where your true self really resides. And when you're in that place, life flows through you much more naturally. So the part of the intention is, if you're faithfully practicing stop, flow becomes almost the natural next step. And because you sense, oh, I'm not bound by my constricted self, I'm free. Oh, now I can love because I have my head, heart, and gut open to me, and I can welcome this place and not be trying to control it. So that's how I see it.
So what I would add to that is that depending on whether you're a P or a J on the Myers-Briggs, you might want to put flow first or stop first. And so, you know, that just, it really is individual. And what is it that you need right now? Do you need to start with a word like free? Would that help you? And so there you go. I think depending on who you are, the possibilities are endless.
And Bill, we've got just a few minutes, but Bill, I'm going to let you unmute yourself if you would. Bill's one of our board members here at IEA Great Lakes. And if you would, ask your question, because I know this is something new to you that we've talked about in the last couple of calls. So ask your question, because I think many people, as they listen to the YouTube or whatever, could be in this same place. So this is a great way for us to end our discussion today.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. First of all, I haven't read your book, so I will, and I'll let you know what I think, but I'm sure it'll be awesome. I also haven't done your training, but this harmony triad dynamic, which is something I learned, several years ago, the beginnings of with David Daniels, and now you've taken it to a whole nother level. It really has been transformative for me, but I am trained in the narrative tradition and the traditional or processed Enneagram, which is wing types and stress or integration and disintegration types, which I also relate to. But do the two ever are the two ever combined? Meaning that, like, since you're doing one in each center, and for 2s, 4s, 7s, and 5s, we don't have the benefit of connecting like the perfect little triangle in the center. You 3, 6, 9 people. So help me how the two are related, or are they completely just different mindsets or theories of integration?
I would like to start this and just say, Bill, what I love is that you are from the narrative tradition, and this book is full of story and actually describes some of the things that you're talking about when you were disconnected from your head. And right. How opening up to the harmony concept was revolutionary for you to receive your little 5 that, was not acceptable, right? Yeah. And so one of the things that we love about the process Enneagram, or the classic style, is we really do say that it has great diagnostic quality. And while, even with Jerry's test, you can look at a percentile, like how are you accessing the resources from all 9 numbers? How are you doing with those arrows and those wings? How are you picking up resources? So we would say that the classic Enneagram symbol helps diagnose what is, and that the harmony model tells us how we could open to more.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, thank you.
What would you add to that, any of my three compadres?
Well, I would say similarly. I mean, we still use Jerry's test as a diagnostic tool for people. But I would say, having given the test to hundreds of people, there's a lot of explanation that has to go into it to make sense to somebody just learning it. Whereas talking about the harmony triads, our experience so far has been, oh, that like visually makes sense, and then that is one less obstacle to them to understanding some more of the depth behind it. So primarily at this point, it's really just they're complementary, but we are I think particularly grateful for the way that the harmony triad isn't, you're not trying to figure out, well, am I going up or down or against or for? You're just taking some of the questions out and saying, well, how am I connecting to these parts of me? And so I spend more of my time leaning into transformation than figuring things out. And so that would be the other thing I've noticed as I've worked with people on this.
Thank you. I think both of those give great clarity to the two models, but then how they are complementary to one another. So,
and Teresa, we need to add to this even a little more.
Sure.
Because, people like Bill, our good friend Bill, who's come from the narrative tradition, in years gone by, we have had the narrative folks, and then we've had the other, what we would say is everybody has a different school that they've learned in. And how do we access the grace that others have while teaching what's given to each of us? I think one of the things that with the narrative model that we so value is story. So even while Doug is saying they have hundreds of tests, these are practitioners as spiritual directors. So they're not looking at tests to put someone in a box or to, say, here's your prescription. They're actually using that to open up story. So they'll even say, so here's how you came out on the test. Can you tell me a little bit about this? And so it's still, whether we call ourselves, quote, narrative tradition, or we've been, raised in another one of the schools, we're all talking about story as being the most important part of helping people open up to transformation. And of course we have Ruthie Landis here, who just wrote a book called We Are the Books We Read. And so Ruthie, we know you're all up in that as well. And all of us, I think even in the IEA, one of the things I'm really appreciating is that we're now getting out of our own little cubicles of the way that we've learned, and we're saying, what else might you offer to me that I haven't been paying attention to? So keep talking to us about narrative tradition, Bill, and we'll keep bringing, these graces as well.
Well said. Very well said. So we could have so much more conversation, and we will continue this. This is the beauty of the Midday Cafe, is this conversation and how we bring all of these things together. I do make sure in the chat that you check out the links. One of the great places that we continue this conversation around this new book is Doug and Adele and Scott and Clare have a Facebook group. Erica has posted that. If you're a Facebook person, you can go there as you read through the book. They would love to hear your questions, see those questions. They've been answering those in the comments, doing some Facebook Lives, continuing to interact with you there. So you can continue that there. You can find the book on Amazon, as well as probably the easiest place to jump out and pick up your copy of the book and reach out in that way. If you love the book, leave a review. Let them know on Amazon there as well. Doug and Adele, Scott and Clare, it's been a blessing to have you with us today. Claire taking a little bit different seat today in our call, but thank you for letting me host you. And
you're awesome. We love you.
Thank you, Teresa, very much. And thank you, Erica.
Yes, Erica.
Been great to get some backstory and just hear from the authors themselves. So check out all of that, and we will see you next month as we come in with a whole nother topic and a whole nother place we'll be going. Remember to share this out on YouTube, though, all of our videos. Share them out with your audience as you're using the tool of the Enneagram. So see you all next month.
Thank
Thank
you.
All right.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.